All right. Good morning, everyone. We've got a fairly large group of people and a lot to get through, so I am going to go ahead and get started. Hope everybody's having a great week and enjoyed the Memorial Day weekend. Without further ado here, let me go ahead and share my screen. Perfect. And can I just get a thumbs up? Can everybody see my screen okay? Perfect. Thank you very much. All right, well, let's jump in. This is a topic that I personally am really excited about. I hope you guys are as well. Um, so let's just get started. Just by quick wave introduction for anybody who's not familiar with Paragus IT. We are an outsourced IT company supporting small and medium-sized businesses, and we are 100% owned by our employees. Our typical client is going to range from 15 to 250 employees. And for those clients, we typically are their entire IT department. For larger organizations, 250 to 1,000, we support internal IT departments and supplement with additional services. And that's really kind of what brings us here today is in part of that role of serving our clients and serving our community, we view it as our obligation to kind of be the experts in IT and paying attention to what's coming, what's happening, making sure that we are aware of how different technologies may affect our clients and trying to do our best to distill those topics down in ways that can help our clients keep up with what's happening in the industry. And that's really what we're trying to do today. So, obviously, I don't think I need to tell anyone on this call that AI is being hyped to a big level. And we talk about AI, there's a lot of different types of AI. We talk about bots, we talk about generative AI like ChatGPT. We're talking about automation now coming into the physical form in robots. And we've done a lot of great webinars where we've explored this from kind of a broad standpoint. Today, though, the goal is to do something a little bit different. What we want to do is take a much deeper dive into a very specific type of AI and to help you understand how you can put some of this to work for you right away. And I assure you that this is going to be a training that is designed to help just about anybody, regardless of your IT background, your knowledge, your experience level. We're not trying to overwhelm you with really, really deep, complex technical things. We want to make this as accessible as possible. And that's how this training is designed today. We certainly can go deeper at a future date and time. But today we want to stay as high level as we can to make this as accessible to as broad an audience. Part of what I'm hoping that you get out of this conversation today is that you leave here understanding what is possible when it comes to these AI bots that we keep hearing about. Are they really coming for our jobs? Are they really going to be as disruptive as we're hearing? What can they do today? And what can't they do? And how should you be thinking about it? If I've answered any of those questions by the end of the day today, I will feel like this was a success. But if I don't, please feel free to continue to keep the conversation going beyond the webinar. As you can tell, this is something that we are very passionate about and are eager to help our clients and our community understand. So let's just talk about for a minute kind of where we are from a technology standpoint. You already are starting to see these AI bots come to life. And some of you may not even realize that you're starting to interact with AI. So I'll give you just a couple of really quick examples. More and more, we're seeing AI take a presence in email. It's either organizing and prioritizing emails, it's in some cases drafting responses, and in some cases, even automatically responding. And I don't mean automatically responding like, hey, I got your email, I'll get back to you, but I mean actually composing a response to that email and sending that response to the recipient. You're probably seeing this most commonly in customer service, but we're starting to see it drift even out of customer service into other types of applications. Scheduling assistance. So more and more we're using AI to coordinate meetings. That's always kind of the bane of all of our existence is how do we find a date and time that works for everybody? More and more AI started to take over that. And then obviously broadly in customer service, especially for phone calls, for email support, where we're interacting with customer service teams, we're starting to see more and more of those AI bots present. We're also seeing them in sales. We're seeing them in logistics, in accounts receivable, accounts payable. They're starting to pop up more and more. And like I said, you may not even realize that the person that you're communicating with may actually be a bot. The reason we keep beating this drum and the reason we keep trying to give this topic a lot of attention is because as more and more organizations adopt this type of technology, it's going to give them a significant competitive advantage. And we're trying to do our best to make sure that the clients and the communities that we work with are aware of what's happening and are trying to make it as accessible to them as possible. Because if you totally get left behind on this and you're going up against organizations who are using this, whereas you're still 100% human with no AI augmentation, you're going to increasingly feel this kind of disparate connection where it just doesn't feel like you're even competing on the same playing field anymore. And so it is important that we make this as accessible and approachable as possible, that we demystify it, and we help you understand how you may approach it within your own organizations and businesses. So in our last webinar, I talked about this idea of really taking your org chart and starting over again. So kind of printing out your existing org chart, going into a room with a whiteboard and rebuilding it from scratch. And when you're rebuilding it, the way that I would encourage you to think about it is, what are the roles that exclusively need to be done by humans with no AI augmentation at all? The entirety of that task will be performed by a human being. Which roles should be humans in the seat, but augmented by AI to help them do their job? So maybe there's a human doing 80% of the work, but they've got an AI assistant or a team of AI assistants who's augmenting them, who's making that work more efficient, or improving the quality. And then which roles in your org chart are really well suited to just be purely AI, where we could remove the human from that job, replace it with an AI bot or several AI bots, and have those bots take the place of a human. And that allows those humans to be spread into other roles that are maybe in more value driven. It may allow you to scale and grow your business without having to add more humans. But looking at ways that we can leverage AI to take the humans that we have in our businesses and use them to their best use case, where they're producing the most value, they're getting the highest level of satisfaction, and they're generating the most value for the organization. So let's now kind of talk about, as we go down that road, what are these AI employees? They can be digital workers, meaning that they can be a software entity that's performing tasks independently. They can learn preferences and start to make judgment calls. And they're always available. They're going to be available 24/7. If you wanted to have email responded to at all hours of the day, if you wanted scheduling requests to be handled no matter what, if when a customer has a problem, you want to get that logged into a system and a task performed, a resource assigned, a job number, an order number, and that normally requires a human, and you want that to happen 24/7, it can be done. But it isn't, we're moving beyond what we used to think of as automation, where we talked about RPA, role process automation, where we're basically taking a very scripted process and we're using, if then that statements to automate that process. That has a use case, and we're still doing plenty of that work. But I think what really elevates this conversation is that middle piece there, where there's a decision-making component to this. It's not this linear, very scripted process where the task is always kind of pre-established and the bot is just reacting to pre-approved programming. But rather, you're introducing a concept where a bot or an AI is going to consider many possibilities and make a decision on its own about which possibility is the right scenario for that particular application or use case or situation. And that's where we're really getting a huge leg up on RPA, which was limited because of how structured it was. So there's three kind of major types of AI employees. There's your AI chatbot. This is largely a communication tool. So it's either answering questions, it's handling basic customer service inquiries, it's taking large FAQs and digesting them and making them more interactive. It could work within a website. It could work within a messaging platform. You probably go to websites where there's a chat button in the bottom right-hand corner and you talk to it and it's trying to answer questions. Some of them are terrible. Some of them drive you nuts. Some of them honestly give this whole concept a bad name because they're so awful. Some of them are so good you have no idea that you're talking to an AI. And right now, we are still living in a world where that is the full spectrum. Unfortunately, I think mostly when we think about these, we think about the really bad ones because we may not even realize the good ones are AI. And so there is a spectrum there. It is not a all bots are created equal by any means, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a few minutes. But these are the types of bots that we're talking about, and we're seeing them externally facing where they're interacting with customers. We're also seeing them internally where they're helping employee answers questions. The next is an AI agent. This is maybe the most common form of AI in terms of in replacing a human being. And these are going to be bots that you've created that have a set of goals and tasks that they're asked to perform, but given a certain level of autonomy to make independent decisions. And they're going to learn from data and interaction. So you're going to be able to praise, criticize, critique their decision-making process, and they're going to learn and grow and develop from that. They also can often proactively understand kind of what's going to happen next, get ahead of tasks, be able to look at the entire workflow and understand context and understand, okay, I need to do this a certain way because 3 steps later, I'm going to be doing it this way. And oftentimes, even though we talk about this in singularity, where we see like AI agent, I'll tell you most commonly when we're doing more complex tasks, what we're actually doing is building 3, 5, 7 different individual agents, and then 1 or 2 supervisory agents. And it's the kind of the culmination of all of those that is completing the work. So if I have an employee who's doing a task today or a job today, that job likely is not just doing one specific task 8 hours a day. It's probably 5 or 6 different tasks that maybe are very interrelated, but they're not, just a single task. When we were bringing an AI agent, we're not going to bring in an AI agent to train them on those 7 different tasks. What we're going to do is bring in 7 different AI agents. Each one's going to be trained on one of those specific tasks. Then we're going to add a layer of supervision, maybe even multiple layers of supervision that are going to look at the entirety of the work and make recommendations and critiques and corrections if they see things out of place. That's usually what we're looking at when we're talking about AI agents doing autonomous work. And then there's AI assistants. AI assistants are really tools that you're leveraging to do your job. So this is where we talk about like AI augmentation for the human. So if I'm a human trying to do the job of a CEO and I have an AI assistant or AI assistants who are helping me do that job, who are helping me with my communication skills, they're helping me with my presentation skills, they're building documents and presentations for me, they're helping me to think through complex tasks, maybe do some strategic thinking. They're really an assistant to augment my own intelligence and my own thinking to make me more effective at my job. So these are kind of the 3 major categories. We could get into debates and weeds about more complexity than this, but just to keep it simple and high level, we're going to think about it in these 3 lenses. So as we start to kind of go down this road, as much as it bothers some people, I do find it is most useful to think of these like coworkers. And I know that that viscerally bothers some people, including some members of our own team here. I have just found it personally a lot easier to give them names, to give them personalities, to think of them like coworkers, and to treat them like coworkers, to give them feedback. Hey, I really liked how you did that. Hey, I didn't like how you did that. I really liked your response here. That was a great email. This was a terrible email. Please don't ever say that again. Here's why. I find that especially with that second category, the AI agent, that the more you think of them like a coworker, treat them like a coworker, have expectations for them like a coworker, you're going to find them to be more, in my mind, effective. So you can think of them as research. They can be gathering information for you while you're sleeping, while you're not working, bringing that to you, summarizing it. They can read all your emails and give you a daily summary. They can be monitoring what's happening in the real estate market. They could be monitoring what's happening on 6 different blogs that you want to follow. They could be reading every industry newsletter, doing a lot of kind of research type work. They can be doing analytics. So they could be taking a whole bunch of things, running some reports, giving you some data saying, hey, based on yesterday's productivity levels, here's some recommendations. Here was a trend. Here's a problem. Here's the exception. Here's the median. Here's the mean, those types of things. Certainly scheduling we've talked about, and then communication. I think that's probably the most obvious for a lot of us. All right. That's the background. That's the context. Now the fun part. I told you I was going to teach you how to do some stuff. So we are going to shift gears now and do that. And I'm going to start with kind of the most simple, and then we're going to work our way up. There's going to be a total of 4 different demos I'm going to do for you. And we're going to start off with what's called a custom GPT. Now, the 2 technology platforms that I'm going to use for today are a couple of different versions of OpenAI. OpenAI is most famous for ChatGPT. It has other products that we're going to explore a little bit today, but 3 of my demos are going to be based on OpenAI technology. And then one of my demos is going to be based on using something called Azure Copilot Studio. Azure Copilot Studio, I think, is one of the most accessible forms of AI bot creation to people who don't have a deep technical background. And so I'm going to show you some use cases for that and hopefully give you some inspiration that you might be able to use in your own businesses. So I'm going to jump right in here. All right, so we're going to start off fairly simple and straightforward with what is called a custom GPT. So this is going to be available to you if you pay OpenAI for a paid subscription of their product. There's several different versions of that that you could do. The minimum, I believe, is still $20 a month. So everything I'm going to show you would require at least that $20 a month level. I am on what is called the Teams level, which is $30 a month. We can get into debates about that later, but just to give you some context, this isn't necessarily available to you on the free version, but at $20 a month, if you can't get $20 of value out of this, you're doing it wrong. So here's how it works. Once you're in, you're going to click on the little blue icon over here, and you're going to go to My GPTs. Now, what you're going to see here are any GPTs that you have already created. From there, if you don't have any, you're just going to hit Create GPT and make a brand new GPT. Now, when you are creating your GPT, the very first thing you get to do is give it a name. Again, I personally like thinking these as like people or coworkers, and I like to give them actual names. But you can call it bot one, you can call it HR bot, you can call it whatever you'd like to call it. It doesn't actually matter. It's really just going to be mainly for you and how you're going to interact with it. So for this particular one, I'm going to call it Mary the Travel Planner. This is kind of a combination of making it a person, but also being specific about its purpose. Now I'm going to give it a description. So Mary is our in-house travel expert, available for, I'll leave it at that. Now we're going to get to instructions. Now, when I said the name and the description were not that important, they're not. What is really, really important is the instructions. And when I evaluate people's custom GPTs and I look at kind of what have they done well, what are they struggling, 90% of the time, it's a lack of instructions. So these instructions need to be incredibly verbose. Don't let the size of this text box fool you. There's a reason these arrows are here. You will likely end up writing a lot in order to make your custom GPT do exactly what you want. I'm not going to go through all of it right now and be boring, but it's going to be things like, I prefer to fly business or first class if it's over 4 hours. I hate, I was going to say United Airlines. I should say American Airlines. It's I love to ride the train whenever possible, and on and on. And I'm going to start to just give it as much information that is helpful to me as possible. And in certain circumstances, what I'm actually going to do is write this a little bit more from the personality of the bot. So if I was really doing this, I would say, you are an expert travel consultant. You assist our internal staff with planning, travel for their jobs. And we're going to go through and continue. If I want to give them a little personality, I could say you are very friendly and a little sassy. Uh, when assisting me, and then I can leave those comments there. And we're going to go on and on and on. And you're going to do what's called positive prompting and negative prompting. So positive prompting is when you tell it how you want it to respond. You're friendly and a little sassy is positive prompting. I love to ride train whenever possible is positive prompting. You're telling it what you do want. Negative prompting is I hate American Airlines. Or I could also say, never suggest that I take a flight that has more than one layover. That would be negative prompting. So that's me telling the bot what not to do, which in many cases you're going to find is more important than even what you tell it to do. Both are obviously critical, but the negative prompting, I think, is where a lot of people struggle or miss out on an opportunity to make the bot better than it otherwise could be. I'm going to go on. The typical, ChatGPT prompt to begin with is probably around 300 to 400 words. And then I'm going to test my bot. And as I test my bot, I'm going to continue to revise the instructions. So it's a little bit of like a trial and error process where I kind of come up with my original thesis for how I want this bot to work. I try it out. I see what works and it doesn't work. And in the case of a custom GPT, my only real means of feedback is to come in and adjust the instructions. So I'm just going to continue to adjust the instructions over and over and over again until it's doing what I want. Uh, Moving on from that for a second, I then have these conversation starters. These are just fun little pre-written prompts. I could put, where do you want to go today? And that's just a fun little way to start off a conversation with the bot. They're not super critical. Don't lose sleep over them. I'll show you the use case in a moment of kind of where you might use those beyond just kind of having some fun with it. Now the knowledge base. This is where custom GPTs are really cool. You have the ability to upload additional documentation that the GPT is going to consider when answering questions. Now, what you're going to find is a little bit of frustrating with these is they're not just going to solely rely on the documentation you provide. You are giving them a data source that they can reference, and that data source is prioritized pretty high in their data decision-making algorithm, but it is not exclusive. They are going to continue to use their own knowledge. They're going to continue to use what they find online and its own training to answer questions. And you will, in some cases, find this to be a limiting factor. If you're trying to say the only answer is this documentation, if it can't find the answer in the documentation, it will occasionally just make stuff up. No matter how many times you tell it not to, this is still a challenge with some of these kind of simple, easy to use tools. They're very powerful. You can build it in 30 minutes. You each could have a bot up and running by the end of the day, but it's going to have some limitations. And one of them is it's not always going to do exactly what you've told it to do. It is going to improvise a little bit. But if you do have documents, you just upload them here. Then you get into the capabilities. The capabilities are, what are you allowing this particular bot to have access to? So web search means it can go Google stuff, for lack of a better term. Canvas is like a cool interactive platform where, let's say you're working on a PowerPoint presentation. It could dump the whole PowerPoint presentation into Canvas, and instead of having a chat with it back and forth, you could like highlight a section and say, fix this or rewrite this or make this more concise, and have it be a little bit more interactive with very large format, large form conversations. Image generation is exactly what it sounds like. Is this bot going to be able to make images? And then code interpreter and data analyst is necessary if you're doing any kind of programming, but also if you're doing things like uploading an Excel spreadsheet or asking for any kind of review or analysis on data. Actions we're not really going to get into, but actions are where you could then link the bot to other technology. So this is where if your CRM let's say you're using Monday.com, and Monday.com has an API that we could connect to this. And you could say, when I say schedule a meeting with this client, you're going to send them an email and you're going to add something to Monday.com. You can program your bot to do that. It's a little bit more advanced because you're going to have to understand some of the API calls. We're not going to get into that today. I'd put that kind of in the more advanced mastery kind of class, but it is there as a feature. So I've made my bot. The last thing I'm going to do is just give it a headshot, and I can just use DALL-E, which is OpenAI's image generator, to create a headshot for my bot. Or if I wanted to, I could upload my own photo if I had something in particular I wanted to use. I'm just going to use DALL-E. That's my sassy travel agent, and it took it to heart. So now I could ask it something like, I need to get to San Diego by 11 a.m. on Thursday for a client meeting. And you don't have to worry too much about spelling, which is good for me. It will figure most stuff out. I'm going to fix it just because my OCD requires me to, but you don't need to. So we're going to see kind of how it handles this task. So, all right, darling, let's get you to sunny San Diego by 11 a.m. this Thursday for your client meeting. Given your preferences, no American Airlines, business or first class for flights over 4 hours, and a love for train travel, here's the plan. So there's a flight option from JetBlue from Boston Logan to San Diego, and it gives me the details of the departure and arrival time. Then it's got a train option from Worcester to San Diego. It's going to take me 2 days and 20 hours. Worcester to Chicago to Fullerton and San Diego. You'll need to have departed by Monday to arrive on time. Given the time constraints, this option isn't feasible for your Thursday morning meeting. So it is smart enough to know I'm giving you a stupid option, but because you asked for trains, I'm just showing you what that looks like. And then it's going on to say, here's how you get to Boston Logan Airport, because it's assuming that I'm going to take the first option. So it's giving me some information about how long it's going to take me. I could take car, or I could take the commuter rail from Worcester. Summary, best options, JetBlue flight, leave Wednesday evening, Mint business class, arrival Wednesday night, ensuring you're well rested for your 11 a.m. meeting on Thursday. So this is an example of a bot that I was able to make in a few minutes that may actually provide me value. I hate searching for airlines. And this, I haven't fact checked this bot, which I would encourage you to do. But if I was to fact check this, and this actually is a real flight and these are the right times, and if I look at my available options, this truly was the best option, then congratulations, I have done something of value. If it turns out that there was much better options, what I'm going to do is look at, okay, why didn't it consider these other options? And I may just ask it. I may say, hey, how come you didn't recommend this flight? It may say, oh, I didn't pick that one because they don't offer business class. And I might then go back to my instructions and revise that. I like to fly business class if possible, but my preference is always to have the shortest flight possible. And then that may adjust the bot, and then I'm going to test it again. And I'm going to continue to do this kind of trial and error process until I've got something that's providing value to me. Once it's done and I'm happy with it, I'm going to hit create. And now when I create it, I get to do some cool stuff. So first of all, I can decide who has access to it. So by default, it's invite only, meaning if I wanted Eric to have access to this travel bot, I would have to personally invite Eric to access it. The next option is anyone who has the link, but who works at Paragus IT. So anybody who works at Paragus IT who has the custom link could use this bot. The next option would be anybody at Paragus IT. It's going to publish this bot to the entire company. Anybody at the company can use it, even if they don't have the very special link that I have shared. And then from there, I've got two public options. I can do anyone with the link, which would mean that I am giving out this link to people and saying, hey, go to this link and use my bot, and my bot will answer questions for you, will do what you're asking it to do. Or I could use that link to integrate it into something else. So I could take that link and then put like a chat bot on my website and have the chat bot interact with that link, and the two of them communicate together. And then the last option is the GPT store, meaning I'm actually publishing this to the world, and anybody can go searching for my sassy bot, find it, use it, and install it on their own. And I'll just show you, I'm going to leave this one as invite only for now. I don't think she's quite ready for prime time. I have not tested it anywhere near enough to offer this up to anybody. But now I'm going to go back to it. So now this is one of my custom GPTs. But to show you where you can access other GPTs, if you go here and you go to, I'm sorry, if you go to GPTs here, you can search the GPT store of other GPTs that have been created by other people. So this is where you could search by all kinds of different topics and find custom GPTs that other people have designed and just install them. So if you don't want to create one for yourself and you can find one, like here's a marketing bot, here is a Scholar AI, like I'm able to find the bot that I want without having to build it from scratch, and I can just install that bot and start using it without having to build my own. Or I can build my own and use my own, and I can do some combination of both. So that is demo number one, how to use custom GPTs. The thing I haven't showed you is how you can then deploy those. I'm going to save that for a minute because I'll show you when we get to the OpenAI Assistant some other ways that we can do that. The next thing I'm going to show you is how do we build what's called a project in OpenAI. And OpenAI is using project to mean two different things. For the purpose of this, I'm going to start with the simple version of project, which is available to anybody who has a paid license. You'll see it right here on your left-hand side. You'll have a new project feature. And when you click on new project, I'm going to make this one 40th birthday party planner. You could make a project for a major annual conference you have. You could make it a project for, I have one for my board meeting. I have one for my leadership team. I have one for, I record a weekly video to my staff every single week. I have a project for that. So you can make these for any kind of task that you're coming back to over and over again, and you're going to want to leverage AI to assist you with that task or different aspects of that task. So in this case, it's kind of a more social one, a fun one, but there's other things that you could use them for, obviously. Once you build that, it's going to give you the opportunity to upload some files. So this is a way where you could say, here's the guest list, here's the catering menu, here's some photos that I want to include, anything that I want to build into this project, and then instructions. So this is where you're really going to program the personality. You're an expert parting planner. You're really good at making events that are experiential. You're a great taskmaster who's really detail oriented, who thinks about all the nitty gritty stuff. This is where I'm going to really program the personality of my bot, but I'm also going to provide the context. You exist to plan the 40th birthday party for Julia Bean. She is married to Delcy Bean. She's got 3 kids. She lives in New Hampshire, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to give it the context of the background. Then I'm going to give it the personality of what this bot is designed to do. And then I can come back to this well over and over and over again. And each time I come back to it, I'm just going to go to this new chat. And when I start a new chat, like, hey, I need to come up with a design for an invitation, it's going to leverage all of the past conversations we've had about this party. It's going to leverage these custom instructions I've programmed into it, and it's going to leverage any of the files that I've uploaded. So it's taking a normal conversation to the next level and making it very efficient for me to continue a conversation and ask for more assistance and help with a task that is an ongoing task or a repetitive or recurring event. Some other really, really cool use cases of how you could use projects. I have taken, my leadership team here. And what I did is I programmed into my leadership team bot project the DISC personality profiles of each of the members of our team. I can do the same thing with my board of directors. And if I don't know the personality profiles of my board of directors, maybe I haven't done that exercise with them, I can actually go into the project and I could say something to the effect, if I just call this board test, what I could do is I could tell it, I want you to create a personality profile of each of my board members. Ask me as many questions as is needed in order to understand each board member's personality. There are 8 members of the board. Their names are XYZ. Here's links to their LinkedIn profile. Now it's going to go take those LinkedIn profiles, scrape what it can, and then it's going to start interviewing me. And it's going to say, okay, when a meeting starts, who's usually the first person to speak? When there's a controversial topic, who's usually the first one to take the opposing side? Um, when you ask Mary a question, does she tend to be verbose or very, very concise? Does John like to think about something before responding, or does he kind of already know what he wants to say? And it's going to continue to interview me for as many questions as it needs to until it has developed a pretty comprehensive personality profile for each of my board members based on my answers to the questions and, let's just say, the LinkedIn profiles. Now, from that point forward, I could say, I have a board meeting coming up next Friday. Here is the agenda for the meeting, and here's my slide deck. Please review the agenda and the slide deck and let me know what questions I should anticipate. Each time, tell me who's going to ask the question. And I can run basically a board simulation. So I could do my entire board meeting. It can tell me what the simulated questions are. I could draft responses and say, okay, if Scott asked me that and I responded like this, would that satisfy Scott, or would he still feel unresolved? And it's going to continue to help me try to understand what I'm going to need to do to have a very successful board meeting or leadership meeting or annual reset or whatever else that task is. These are all really, really good use cases for projects. Projects are entirely for you. You're not sharing them with anybody else. They're not like the custom GPT where you can publish it to somebody else. They're really just your internal well that you keep coming back to with additional questions or ideas or simulations or thoughts that are all related to a set kind of amount of instructions and a set base number of files that you want it to reference when it answers those questions, as well as all the past conversations you've had on that topic. So those are OpenAI projects. The next thing we're going to talk about are exploring what's called OpenAI's Playground. And this is where it gets a little bit more technical, but I'm going to keep it pretty high level. So this is another paid feature of OpenAI. And what it allows you to do is build these things called OpenAI assistants. So I'm going to just show you, I could create a new project. I'm going to call this one test. Now, within that project, I can build assistants. So you can think of projects just as like containers or folders. They're just a way to organize assistants that you're going to build into groups. So if I was to create a group called test, I could then build AI assistants. So I could build an AI assistant, and I can automatically name it, or I can name it myself. I'm going to call it Dolly. Then I can give it instructions. Now, this is going to look and feel a lot like the custom GPT that I showed you earlier. However, there's a handful of things that you're going to be able to do here that you're not able to do in a custom GPT. A lot of times what you'll see that I do is I build things as a custom GPT first because it's faster and easier. I get some of the kinks worked out, and then I migrate that over to an AI assistant when I'm ready to kind of publish it to more people or make it more widely accessible. So you can take the instructions that you wrote for one of your custom GPTs and you could copy and paste them over here. I'm just going to show you one that I've built. So this is Jack, the sales bot. And what you can see here is I've given Jack a personality and some context. He's a master sales coach with a decade of experience. I've given him a personality. You're heavily influenced by the famous sales coach, Jack Daly. And your approach to sales is very well aligned with the Sandler sales methodology. And then you're great at boosting the confidence of our sales team, providing direction and feedback that helps them succeed in their role. And this is limited. I really should go on and on and on and make this much more detailed. But for the purpose of this example, I've kept it relatively short. Now I get to decide which model of OpenAI do I want to leverage. And I can see all of the different AI models. Now, the reason this matters is it's going to affect the cost of this bot. When you build bots in OpenAI Playground, rather than paying like a flat fee monthly subscription for unlimited use or certain, uses of certain types of models, when you move over to assistance, you're paying on what's called a per token basis. So think of it like the more work the bot has to do, the more questions it answers, the more data it has to look at, all of those cost tokens, and the more tokens, the more expensive. Now, each of these models has a different pricing structure. The newer the model, the more expensive. That's the easiest way. There's obviously a lot more complexity to it. But if I want to use the latest and greatest, newest version of ChatGPT, like if I was using, let's say I was using 4.5 preview, which is actually being taken offline pretty soon. But let's say I use 4.5 preview. This is one of the most expensive ways that I could use this ChatGPT. If I need the latest and greatest and best OpenAI technology, I'm going to use the latest model and I'm going to pay a higher fee. If I don't need the latest and greatest and I'm fine with what was the latest and greatest last month, I can use a lower model and save a lot of money. OpenAI prices the most recent version almost 10 times higher than the one right before that. So what was the greatest thing 2 months ago is now 10 times less expensive as soon as they come up with something else. So it's a great way to keep costs down, is just minimizing which model I'm going to use. And there's more complexity here. Certain models are good at different types of tasks, and we could get into some of the granularity there later, but that's a high level what you're going to be thinking about. Then you can do a file search. And the way files work here is a little bit differently. You create what's called a vector store. It's still going to be that you upload files, but in that vector store, you can do some cool stuff. You can now link it to a SharePoint library. You can link it to a Google workspace. So you can start to include external data sources, not just flat files. So beyond just like uploading a PDF or an Excel spreadsheet, you can point it to a place that has files and it can incorporate those files into its processes. You also can control things like how many files you want it to look at when it's answering a question. And this will not only control your cost, but it might improve the accuracy of your bot. So this is one of those things that you can play with that wouldn't have been available to you in a custom GPT. You can turn on Code Interpreter if you want to be able to write and run code. You can add functions, which are a lot like the actions in OpenAI custom GPT, where you could have it do things like communicate with an API to do a task or perform some function or upload something to our CRM, those types of things. And then you can play with the response in the model. So first, do you want it to respond in text, JSON object, or JSON schema? For most of you, it's going to be text because you're not probably using this for code. And then you can adjust what's called the temperature and the top P. And if you hover over this, it will tell you what those mean. Temperature is basically creativity. The higher the temperature, the more it's going to be creative, and the lower the temperature, the more rigid it's going to become. So if you're looking to have a bot that does not do a lot of creative problem solving or thinking, you're going to bring this way down, and then vice versa. If you want a bot who's quite creative, you can bump this up. One is the default, which is kind of in the middle. And then top P is going to be the diversity in how it looks at an answer. So basically, when it considers possibilities, how likely it is to pick one that's a little bit less, a little more random. So if you want this to be very predictable and very rigid, you're going to move it up or you're going to move it down. So these are just ways that you can tweak and change the personality of your bot once it's built to try to hone in on exactly what you're looking for. Again, it's just a level of control that you don't have access to when you're using just the custom GPT tool. And then the most important piece of this is it is accessible via an API call. So when you build these as a custom GPT, the only way you can interact with it is through that URL that you make. If you build it as an OpenAI assistant, you can talk to it over API. Why is that important? Why is that relevant? Well, what it means is that if you built a custom AI assistant that you were really happy with, that was doing a really good job, and let's say you wanted to bring it to life and bring it over to something like Microsoft Teams, I can go into Microsoft Teams, I can publish my bot as a Teams identity, and I can talk to it almost like it's an employee or a coworker in my company. So I can send it messages, it's going to respond. I can look at prompts that I've written. So like, hey, I want to run a role practice, and I can click on run role practice. Oops, you only need to say it once. Once is enough. And what it's doing is Microsoft Teams is taking this message, sending it over the API to my OpenAI assistant, getting a response, taking that response, bringing it back, and putting it into Microsoft Teams. And this way, I'm not having to leave Microsoft Teams in order to interface with my OpenAI assistant. It makes it much more accessible to your staff, and it feels a lot more human and more like a coworker when you take it to this level. So it's asking me which scenario or product would you like to practice, cold call, discovery call, handling objections. Would you like me to play the role of the prospect, or do you want to coach feedback as you lead the dialogue? And any specific challenges you're looking to overcome. So I'm going to tell Jack what kind of role practice I want to do. Jack knows our sales process, which is why he knows the names of cold call, discovery call. He's saying, which of those are you trying to simulate? And he's open to being the customer or the salesperson. So I could let him know what I want to do. We'd have a conversation. We'd get going. You'll also notice that you can give Jack feedback. Like and dislike will actually help to train Jack to make him better. And so this gives your staff an opportunity to participate in the coaching and development of the AI assistant to try to make it better and more effective. So that's kind of what an OpenAI assistant looks like. I'm going to leave it there just in the interest of time because I want to get on to the fourth and final demo, which is using an Azure bot. So I described this earlier as maybe the most accessible version, and I'm going to show you why. So you just go to copilotstudio.microsoft.com. You may need to buy a license if you don't have one, but assuming that you are correctly licensed, you're literally just going to come in and hit create, and it's going to ask you, what kind of bot do you want to build? And it's got some kind of pre-built templates I can use, like, are you trying to make a weather bot, a safe travel bot, maybe a website Q&A bot, an agent with voice capabilities that I can talk to? Kind of what kind of bot do you want to build? Or I can start from scratch and just hit new agent. And the new agent studio is even more simplistic than the OpenAI one I showed you. It literally just says, what would you like to make? And I'm just going to talk to the AI. I am looking to make a bot to help answer HR questions from employees. It's going to then ask me more questions. It's going to ask me to name my bot. It's going to ask me if I have files that I want the bot to reference. So it's recommending HR assistant. I could say, sounds good. Then it's going to continue to prompt me. I'm going to continue to have a conversation with it. What specific tasks or goals should the HR assistant focus on? It's going to give me examples, like it should answer questions, assist with onboarding processes, offer guidance on company policies. I'm going to continue to answer these questions and go back and forth. In the interest of time, I won't do it all right now, but I'm going to continue to do this until I've got a bot that I'm happy with, and then I hit create. Once I've created it, and I'm going to switch over to another bot just to show you an example. So if I go to one of the bots I've already built, I'm going to go to, where is my Paragus Copilot? No, the Paragus Wayfinder. Okay. So in this particular case, we are a company who loves process documentation. We have a huge library in SharePoint of all of our company processes. Everything is very, very well documented. So what I did was I built a bot called the Paragus Wayfinder. And that's funny because we call our SharePoint library the Paragus Way, and so the Paragus Wayfinder is very aptly named. So it's got a description of what it's going to be doing, all the general instructions of how it's going to help staff. I have turned on what's called generative AI to allow it to be a little bit creative, but I've put limitations on that. I can give it some topics, which are like these little short, like conversation starters, and how I want to approach that. And then most importantly, I've pointed it to a knowledge base. And all of this is as simple as literally clicking, I want to add knowledge. I want to add knowledge. Where does your knowledge exist? A public website, Salesforce, SharePoint. Microsoft has really tried to make this as accessible as possible, where you're not needing to know how to write API calls or do some of the more complex stuff that you would have to do this in OpenAI. OpenAI is catching up. They're trying to also make it easier, but I would say that Microsoft is a little bit ahead of the game when it comes to just the ease of integrating multiple applications together. So you're going to pick those things, and they're continuing to publish new ones all the time. We have one that's based on a SQL database that we can point to and leverage, and it can reference different things in our SQL database. Then under topics, I can do those things I was talking about, like kind of greetings. One of the things that I really like, and I'm going to show you this in a SQL database setting. If I go to this bot, what you can do under the knowledge section is I've connected it to a SQL database. But then what's cool in a SQL database is you can go over and you can write what are called synonyms. So for those of you who have ever interacted with the SQL database before, a lot of times the column names are not the most obvious in terms of what the data contains. So for example, in our ConnectWise Manage, which is our database that we use to keep track of all of our customers' tickets and cases, it has a column named SR underscore service underscore RECID. This is not a name that we're ever going to use when we're referencing a case or a ticket. So I can actually tell Copilot Studio what the synonyms are for that column. If I say the word case or I say the word ticket, this is the column I'm intending to talk about. So you can go back and look at that. And then I could write a description that gives a little bit more detail about that. I can also create a glossary of terms. So if I just want to say, we use the acronym ARM a lot. If I say ARM, I mean Account Relationship Manager. And I can put those types of acronyms in there just to make it easier for the bot to give me helpful responses. At the very end, and I'm fast forwarding here, I can go to channels and I can just publish my bot. So I can say I want to publish it as a phone number that people can call. I want to publish it to Teams and Microsoft Copilot. I want to publish it to Facebook. I want to publish it to my website. I want to publish it to Slack or Telegram. Again, Microsoft has made it very easy to take this thing and bring it to life and have it interact with the outside world without needing to have to write API calls and do some of the more complex things that I would need to do if I was using OpenAI assistants today. And I say today because this stuff changes constantly. Literally everything I said could be invalidated tomorrow. That's the risk I take. But this is what exists today at this moment. It can be an email bot, it could be a direct line speech bot, and then I can see some of the other engagement hubs it's getting able to talk to, ServiceNow, Salesforce, et cetera, et cetera. So I am going to stop there just because I do want to leave a little bit of time for questions, and I know that we are getting tight. So going back to this really quickly, these are just some general stats. They're saying the average productivity gain for an organization is 37%. If you think about what that means for your organization, being able to reduce 37% of your payroll or have 37% more capacity that you can deploy without having to add more payroll, that's a pretty significant thing. 62% response rate, improvement in customer inquiry handling, and about 3.2 million in annual savings is the average expected cost reduction for a typical small business. Obviously, every business is going to be different sizes, but there's just some very general data. Best practices: start with champions, get some enthusiastic early adopters. We have a couple of programs here. We did a weekend hackathon where we invited people to come in and learn about AI and practice with it. And now we have AI meetups where we get together once a month to work together. You've got simple use cases is always where you want to start. It's easier to start small and build up than go for the big, hairy, audacious stuff. Establish governance. It's really, really important to have policies in place around what you can use AI for, what data is allowed to be in there, what platforms you guys are allowing. If you need help writing an AI policy, please reach out. But it's really important you put governance around this so you don't have a data breach. And then measure and adjust. See what's working, make adjustments and tweaks. As I said, it's very much a trial and error process and program. Some of the common hurdles are navigating APIs. The hallucination is a real thing. You will experience it. It is quite frustrating. It's maybe one of the most frustrating things that exists right now. Building complexity. it can be very unclear sometimes how something is going to cost, what it's going to end up, what the expense will be. Reach out if you need assistance with that. Bot orchestration, so building multiple bots that work together as a team, that's a more mastery level thing. And then data security, making sure that you're using the right data in the right places and honoring data sensitivity laws, regulations, customer agreements, etc. Um, some of the biggest challenging concerns when it comes to privacy, you implement zero retention, you use private cloud instances, and you restrict sensitive data. When it comes to job security, position this as augmentation, not replacement. Focus on eliminating the most tedious tasks that your staff hate the most, and create upskilling opportunities within the organization. And then on the technical side, start with the turnkey easy solutions, build internal expertise gradually, and partner with experienced vendors to do the more complex stuff. If you're going to get started tomorrow, build something small, gather feedback, expand gradually, and then just keep identifying more opportunities. And if you need help, these are all the different things that we can help organizations with, from executive consulting to custom AI solutions, workflow automation, business intelligence, AI governance, as I was mentioning, and continuous support on an ongoing basis. All right, I will stop there and open up for questions. I can see we have a couple things in the chat, but feel free to raise your hand or post more things in the chat. So one is, does our team provide services to build out custom integrations? So we do. We predominantly focus with existing clients first and foremost. And then if we have additional capacity, we will occasionally work with an organization who's not one of our managed service customers. But our managed service customers always get to go to the top of the front of the line when it comes to AI projects. If we give the assistant access to a file location that contains customer AR data, is that data still protected? So it all depends on which AI platform you're using. For example, I was using OpenAI Assistant. In OpenAI Assistant, I have a setting I can turn on or off about whether that data can be used for training purposes. Keep in mind, though, if I turn it off and I don't allow it for training purposes, the bot is still going to have access to it, and anybody who has access to the bot could get data from that. So you have to be careful with where you're deploying that bot and who has access to it. If you're talking about like the custom GPTs and the projects, then it just comes down to what subscription you have with OpenAI. I pay for the Teams one, which is $30 a month, because it guarantees that my data won't be used for training purposes and it keeps it contained within my project. There's a lot more kind of complexity there, but a lot of it's going to come down to what platform you're using, and it'll all be in the details and fine-grained print of how that data privacy is held. If the knowledge sources come from confidential files in SharePoint, can the bot be restricted to users with specific access permissions? So yes and no. It's more about where you're deploying the bot to. So if you deploy the bot through Microsoft Teams, you can deploy that bot to only specific members of a team. Same with Slack, where you can control the user who has access to the bot. Now, if somebody gets access to the bot who's not one of those users through another means or methodology, they will technically have access to that data. So it is important to think about how what your plan for implementation is, so that if you are going to expose confidential data, you're very, very careful with the way you deploy that bot and what restrictions you put on it. There's some other more complex things you can do. Mary is posting in the chat our next 2 exciting webinars we have coming up. We have one in June about hire to buy or to bot. We're going to be partnering with Bank W Staffing, which is a very significant staffing agency in the New England area. And they're going to be talking about how they're looking at AI and how it's impacting staffing in traditional sense, when you should outsource, when you should hire somebody, and when you should maybe build a bot. And then in July, we have one on your employees are your biggest cyber risk. We're going to explore some of the latest and greatest things that hackers are doing to trick your staff into hurting your business, and all the things that you can do to avoid that. Are there any other questions about today's content? Anything else we can help answer for anybody? All right, we're going to wrap it up there. If you're too shy to raise your hand in the group setting, please feel free to reach out. We're happy to continue these conversations offline. We want to be as helpful to you as possible. And hopefully some of you are going to take what you learned today and go build something great. Remember, AI doesn't have to be scary. We still get to decide what we build. And if we build things that aren't scary, that follow the rules, that add value, AI can be very powerful and very helpful in a good way. And that's what we want to continue to promote. So I hope you guys go off and do wonderful things. And if we can help in any way, please reach out and let us know.